Let's see. Yes, so my current role right now is I'm the payload chief engineer on the Mars sample return. So this is bringing sample back from Mars. We just started this a few years ago, and it's a follow-on on the Mars 2020. Before that, I worked on Earth orbiter missions, 6 of them, launched them. STS-83, 94, and STS-107. Actually, STS-107 is the space shuttle Columbia that didn't make it on the way back. A very tragic incident at the time. It was a great wake-up call, and it was another testament on the fact that space business is not really easy. It's not a zero-risk business in general. And so definitely something that helps learn. There's a lot of lessons learned that we built from that. Following that, worked on 3 other missions. One is to measure ocean height, kind of help a little bit understanding the evolution of global warming and whatnot. Then a mission called WISE, kind of survey the sky for in the infrared for all the objects, kind of cataloging the Google way. And then finishing with the SMAP, which is the Solar Motion Passive mission. The picture that you have in the back is today's layout of the ground of Mars, the various mission lander and rovers that we have. Some of them, no longer work, but they work at a certain time, and some of them are dormant. And you can see pretty much there's a fair amount of those. This is a little way to help us understand what's going on Mars. So why Mars? Really, the alternative could be, for instance, Venus, but Venus is pretty hot there. It's about 460 degrees Celsius on the surface. Its atmospheric pressure is about 90 times the atmosphere of Earth, and on top of that, it has sulfuric acid, which is very corrosive for a human being. So it's really rough environment. So in general, so what we want to do is really, at the end of the day, end up as a human on Mars. This is kind of part of a human being. It's in our genes. We are explorer, whether we like it or not. We have that explorer mindset or attitude that we want to get to. So Mars is a destination we try to achieve after getting to the moon, at least for what's going on. Like any place you want to go to, you want to find out what's the weather like, what's the soil like, conditions and all that. So you have to build all of the corporate knowledge about how to get there and what you're going to face when you get there. And so there are multiple goals that were established throughout the years. Back in the 70s, is basically the weather on Mars, looking at the characterization of the climate on Mars, the geology, if we want to do anything there, what needs to be done to accomplish that, and ultimately getting a human on the surface of Mars and back. So this is just, in general, a really snapshot of the mass agglomeration family. As you see, there's many spacecraft and many landers that try to make it to Mars, and it's not easy. And one of the famous quotes from Kennedy, United States president, was that we're doing things not because they're easy, it's because they are really hard. And so getting to Mars is not easy. You see how many nations and spacecraft tried to make it to Mars. Only basically half of them made it. The other half couldn't for one way or another. And so it's not because that the spacecraft didn't make it to Mars, therefore it's a failure. It's actually the journey leading to getting an orbiter on Mars or there. That's really the most important part. Obviously, landing successfully and so on is add a lot to the festivity that will take place. So a lot of countries try it. Right now, there's only 2 countries that can land on Mars. The U.S. and then China landed recently also on Mars successfully. So throughout the process, we started looking at getting Mars back in the Viking era. So in 1976, we landed 2 landers. And then after that, we got into the habit of getting rovers. So we've got Sojourner, we got Spirit and Opportunities. When you look at these various missions here, there's a combination, either lander or a rover with 6 wheels, classic what we've been doing. Each mission builds on the experience that we learned from the one before. So whether we have different scientific instruments that goes on, or the technology that we use to operate the lander or the rover is different. But every time we build upon the previous mission to gain more and more insight into Mars in general. And so the scientific goals changes a little bit or evolves. The technology that we mature also evolve as well. So on last year, in February 18th, we landed Perseverance successfully. I think a lot of people followed that. It was very exciting, the news. It was exciting for all of us. I worked on it about 7 years, and definitely was very fruitful. The science goal for Perseverance was a little bit different than what we had before. One of them is we're looking for what we call a biosignature, an ancient biosignature, just to understand a little bit what happened to Mars, what happened just in general from bioscience. So that's one of them. The other one is really characterization of geology. The geology on Earth, there's some similarity with geology on Mars. We try to understand how that correlates, and also how Mars ended up the way it ended up. The fourth goal, there are actually many other objectives, but one of them is really to collect samples. And the idea is that we want to bring those samples back to Earth. That's where we can study them and then get more insight into what's going on in this sediment. Because here, obviously, we have many sophisticated laboratories that, more than what we can send and do in situ. So, and then I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then on top of that, the last one is production of oxygen. So when you go to a planet, you'd like to have air, breathable air, water, and also fuel for the return vehicles. So being able to produce oxygen on Mars is a very, very important step that help us a little bit build on the future. So, and we accomplished that. So where is Perseverance and where is Ingenuity? So as you probably followed last year, the landing of Perseverance, but also as exciting as it was, there was also the helicopter, Ingenuity. It was a tech demo. It's supposed to fly 2, 3, 4 times maybe at best. We are at flight number 33 and counting. And so a huge success for the team, for everybody else. Actually, it really caught the attention of a lot of people. There's a lot of kids that very, very attracted, try to understand a little bit how that works, and really motivate them because they can relate to a helicopter or drone or something like that. As of today, actually, this is probably outdated by the time where we are. We are at Sol 565. Sol is a Martian day. It's a little bit longer than an Earth day. We've basically traversed for 8 miles. Ingenuity had 33 flights, and we've got about 4.5 miles, flight for about an hour. And also produce oxygen, produce 40 grams of oxygen. It sounds small, but really what we did prove, we proved the technology a little bit, at least one way of producing oxygen. We're gonna need much more than that if you wanna fly from Mars, but at least the concept, it's there, and we were able to produce for the first time oxygen on a different planet. So first time oxygen on the first planet, and then first time flying an object on another planet. A little bit, it was an historic moment because it kind of reminds some of us, the Wright brothers back early 19th century, where we had the first airplane taken off. So, like I mentioned earlier, one of the main things that we're trying to do is try to bring sample back to Earth. And so we went through a systemic, there's a huge science committee that decide where to core, where to get the samples, and so on. A lot of conversation to pick up. So we landed, actually, if I go here, so we landed a little bit where you see there. I don't think there's a pointer, but that's where we landed. Then we traversed all of the area, and we end up a little bit by the delta. This is what we call the Area Jezero crater. It's a very rich, supposedly rich scientific area. It used to be a lake, and there's a delta. So we know that through the delta line, you get a bunch of attraction of sediments. So if you want to collect science that has some biosignature, getting around the delta is a very, very good place to get. We also picked up the probably the most dangerous area to land. There were so many obstacles and all that stuff. So being able to land exactly where we wanted was a challenge, but we beautifully completed by the team. The start on the bottom here, the rocks that we cored were a little bit kind of surprised. They are igneous type materials, so basically they crystallize after they melt, kind of more volcanic-like. There was not many of sediments, so it wasn't a setback. It was more, that's interesting. That's not what we were expecting. And so, but as we get closer to the delta, we were able to see actually signature of organics, and so that was, we have an instrument called Sherlock that is based spectrometry in the UV, and it literally lit up. A lot of signature of the organics material that's in there, and that's kind of very encouraging. So it makes science even more and more valuable, and it kicked up basically our sample return, basically the whole concept of bringing samples back to from Mars. The first sample that you see there on the bottom right, that was the first time where we cored, coring meaning going to a rock and drilling and getting the core out. It was a very exciting time, and as we install inside the belly, we have these little tubes at about this long that can host about this much of core, of regolith. When we looked at it after coring, it was empty. So to the surprise of a lot of us, this is one other testament of the fact that Mars, even though we think we know a lot about it, we're still learning every time. And so what it turns out to be that the core that we pulled was kind of crumbled as we proceeded with the installation inside the belly of the Perseverance. But we gotta end up bringing it eventually because that's represent a little bit the atmosphere, we call an atmospheric sample. So we can bring a sample of the atmosphere of Mars here on Earth that we can study and analyze. Okay, so the whole idea is really we want to bring samples and analyze them on Earth. So how to do that? This is kind of the overall architecture of the mission, okay, from start to finish. It's going to sound complex, but really the various steps makes a lot of sense. So we started first with the Mars 2020 missions. As it goes up, we have Perseverance collecting these samples. Now we have two other missions coming up. One is called ERO mission, and the other one is SRL, and they stand Earth Return Orbiter and the lander. So what's going to happen is SRL is going to launch in 2028. It's going to be carrying a rocket. It's going to be carrying 2 helicopters and a robotic arm. And I'll describe a little what they're going to all doing. And then the other mission, ERO mission, is going to launch in 2027, so a year earlier. And what it's going to be doing is going to go to Mars and orbit Mars. It's the rendezvous orbiter, okay? And then, so let's see. Okay, so this is the family portrait of what's going on. You have the lander, you've got a rocket. This is Perseverance, that's ERO, and then you've got the top left is one of the 2 helicopters. So the idea is that when we land, Perseverance is going to come to the lander, okay? We're going to remove these tubes I was describing earlier, and we're going to install them in a canister, okay? A canister is the size of the basketball size, roughly. We're going to install 30 of them, 30 tubes. Some of them will be coming from Perseverance itself. Some of them will be coming from Perseverance, which is going to drop them elsewhere. So also the helicopter is going to go and get these tubes and bring them back to the lander. With this robotic arm manipulation that is located here in the front of the lander, we're going to take each tube and install them in these canisters, okay, that they are located in the front of the rocket. And so once we fill up the rocket with the 30 samples, we're going to launch the rocket from Mars. So that's going to be the first rocket launched from another planet. This is a huge thing. So effectively, you get a lander that's like almost like a ship carrier. You know, you got rockets, you've got helicopters and robotics and all that stuff. So it makes it really, really exciting and challenging. And that's the beauty of the mission. As the rocket goes up in space, leave the Mars atmosphere, it's going to release this little canister that I was describing. That's the canister that some shape like that that hosts these tubes. And so what's going to happen is that it's going to release. So you see them in the picture up there. It's going to release this in orbiting on Mars. And as it's orbiting Mars, this canister is going to be captured by a container, okay? And this is how it looked like. This is the front of the container. So to the right, the OS, this canister is going to be captured in there, and it's going to be manipulated, and then put it back into this entry vehicle. So I don't know if you guys have already a headache by listening to this whole concept, but it really does make actually perfect sense. It sounds very complex because it is complex actually, but it's not something that woke up and end up with this architecture. It was really methodical ways by looking at what is the lowest risk approach to be able to bring Mars samples safely and back to Earth. So once it's filled into that, what we call the entry vehicle, this Aero is going to come back to Earth, and when you get close enough, it's going to release this entry vehicle. It's going to go ballistically on Earth. It's going to go in the Utah, one of the deserts in Utah, and then that's where we're going to go ahead and collect these samples and do all the science that we want to do. So complexity comes really, it's really, if you break that down, this whole what's going on in here, as I described, it makes perfect sense. It's the least risk approach. But as a whole, when you look at it on the start, as I was describing in here, this is the end-to-end, a little bit, the whole process and concept of bringing back sample to Mars. So once we understand that better and all that, we'll be definitely ready for human to go to Mars. And that's all what I had to say today. So these are my contact information. And if you have any questions, feel free to find me somewhere, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. So that's it. Thank you. There we go. Oh, thanks. Thank you. Yeah.